Book 3, Chapter 1 of The Invasion by William Le Queux. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Tom Weiss. Book 3, The Revenge. Chapter 1, A Blow for Freedom. Daily Telegraph Office, October 1, 2 p.m. 3 days have passed since the revolt at King's Cross, and each day, both on the Horse Guards Parade and in the park, opposite Dorchester House, there have been summary executions. Von Kronhelm is in evident fear of the excited London populace, and is endeavouring to cow them by his plain-spoken and threatening proclamations, and by these wholesale executions of any person found with arms in his or her possession. But the word of command does not abolish the responsibility of conscience, and we are now awaiting breathlessly for the word to strike the blow in revenge. The other newspapers are reappearing, but all that is printed each morning is first subjected to a rigorous censorship, and nothing is allowed to be printed before it is passed and initialed by the two gold-spectacled censors who sit and smoke their pipes in an office to themselves. Below we have German sentries on guard, for our journal is one of the official organs of Von Kronhelm, and what now appears in it is surely sufficient to cause our blood to boil. To-day there are everywhere signs of rapidly increasing unrest. Londoners are starving, and are now refusing to remain patient any longer. The Daily Bulletin of the League of Defenders, though the posting of it is punishable by imprisonment, and it is everywhere torn down where discovered by the Germans, still gives daily brief news of what is in progress, and still urges the people to wait in patience for the action of the government, as it is sarcastically put. Soon after 11 o'clock this morning, a sudden and clearly premeditated attack was made upon a body of the Bremen infantry who were passing along Oxford Street from Holborn to the Marble Arch. The soldiers were suddenly fired upon from windows of a row of shops between Newman Street and Rathbone Place, and before they could halt and return the fire, they found themselves surrounded by a great armed rabble who were emerging from all the streets leading into Oxford Street. While the Germans were manoeuvring, some unknown hand launched from a window a bomb into the centre of them. Next second there was a red flash, a loud report, and 25 of the enemy were blown to atoms. For a few moments the soldiers were demoralized, but orders were shouted loudly by their officers, and they began a most vigorous defence. In a few seconds the fight was as fierce as that at King's Cross, for out of every street in that working-class district lying between Tottenham Court Road and Great Portland Street on the north, and out of Soho on the south, poured thousands upon thousands of fierce Londoners, all bent upon doing their utmost to kill their oppressors. From almost every window along Oxford Street a rain of lead was now being poured upon the troops, who vainly strove to keep their ground. Gradually, however, they were by slow degrees forced back into the narrow side turnings up Newman Street and Rathbone Place, into Mortimer Street, Foley Street, Goodge Street, and Charlotte Street, and there they were slaughtered almost to a man. 2 officers were captured by the armed mob in Tottenham Street, and after being beaten, were stood up and shot in cold blood as vengeance for those shot during the past 3 days at Von Kleppen's orders at Dorchester House. The fierce fight lasted quite an hour, and though reinforcements were sent for, yet, curiously, none arrived. The great mob, however, were well aware that very soon the iron hand of Germany would fall heavily upon them. Therefore, in frantic haste, they began soon after noon to build barricades and block up the narrow streets in every direction. At the end of Rathbone Place, Newman Street, Berners Street, Wells Street, and Great Tickfield Street, huge obstructions soon appeared, while on the east all by-streets leading into Tottenham Court Road were blocked up, and the same on the west in Great Portland Street, and on the north where the district was flanked by the Euston Road, so that by 2 o'clock the populous neighbourhood bounded by the 4 great thoroughfares was rendered a fortress in itself. Within that area were thousands of armed men and women from Soho, Bloomsbury, Marylebone, and even Camden Town. There they remained in defiance of Von Kronhelm's newest proclamation, which stared one in the face from every wall. Later. The enemy were unaware of the grave significance of the position of affairs, because Londoners betrayed no outward sign of the truth. Now, however, nearly every man and woman wore pinned upon their breasts a small piece of silk about 2 inches square, printed as a miniature Union Jack, the badge adopted by the League of Defenders. Though Von Kronhelm was unaware of it, Lord Byfield, in council with Greatorex and Bamford, had decided that in order to demoralize the enemy and give him plenty of work to do, a number of local uprisings should take place north of the Thames. These would occupy Von Kronhelm, who would experience great difficulty in quelling them, and would no doubt eventually recall the Saxons from West Middlesex to assist. If the latter retired upon London, they would find the barricades held by Londoners in their rear, and Lord Byfield in their front, and be thus caught between two fires. In each district of London there was a chief of the Defenders, and to each chief these orders had been conveyed in strictest confidence. Therefore, to-day, while the outbreak occurred in Oxford Street, there were fully a dozen others in various parts of the metropolis, each of a more or less serious character. Every district has already prepared its own secret defences, its fortified houses, and its barricades and hidden byways. Besides the quantity of arms smuggled into London, every dead German has had his rifle, pistol, and ammunition stolen from him. Hundreds of the enemy have been surreptitiously killed for that very reason. Lawlessness is everywhere. Government and army have failed them, and Londoners are now taking the law into their own hands. In King Street, Hammersmith; in Nottingdale, in Forest Road, Dalston; in Wick Road, Hackney; in Commercial Road East, near Stepney Station, and in Prince of Wales Road, Kentish Town, the League of Defenders this morning, at about the same hour, first made their organisation public by displaying our national emblem together with the white flags with the scarlet St. George's Cross, the ancient battle flag of England. For that reason, then, no reinforcements were sent to Oxford Street. Von Kronhelm was far too busy in other quarters. In Kentish Town, it is reported, the Germans gained a complete and decisive victory, for the people had not barricaded themselves strongly. Besides, there were large reinforcements of Germans ready in Regent's Park, and these came upon the scene before the defenders were sufficiently prepared. The flag was captured from the barricade in Prince of Wales Road, and the men of Kentish Town lost over 400 killed and wounded. At Stepney the result was the reverse. The enemy, believing it to be a mere local disturbance and easily quelled, sent but a small body of men to suppress it. But very quickly, in the intricate by-streets off Commercial Road, these were wiped out, not one single man surviving. A second and third body were sent, but so fiercely was the ground contested that they were at length compelled to fall back and leave the men of Stepney masters of their own district. In Hammersmith and in Nottingdale the enemy also lost heavily, though in Hackney they were successful after hard fighting. Everyone declares that this secret order issued by the League means that England is again prepared to give battle, and that London is commencing by her strategic movement of local rebellions. The gravity of the situation cannot now for one moment be concealed. London, north of the Thames, is destined to be the scene of the fiercest and most bloody warfare ever known in the history of the civilized world. The Germans will of course fight for their lives, while we shall fight for our homes and for our liberty. But right is on our side, and right will win. Reports from all over the metropolis tell the same tale. London is alert and impatient. At a word she will rise to a man, and then woe betide the invader. Surely Von Kronhelm's position is not a very enviable one. Our two censors in the office are smoking their pipes very gravely. Not a word of the street fighting is to be published. They will write their own account of it. 10 p.m. There has been a most frightful encounter at the Oxford Street and Tottenham Court Road barricades, a most stubborn resistance and gallant defence on the part of the men of Marylebone and Bloomsbury. From the lips of one of our correspondents who was within the barricade, I have just learned the details. It appears that just about 4 o'clock, General von Wilberg sent from the city a large force of the 19th Division under Lieutenant General Frankenfield, and part of these, advancing through the squares of Bloomsbury into Gower Street, attacked the defenders' position from the Tottenham Court Road, while others coming up Holborn and New Oxford Street entered Soho from Charing Cross Road and threw up counter barricades at the end of Dean Street, Wardour Street, Berwick, Poland, Argyle, and the other streets, all of which were opposite the defences of the populace. In Great Portland Street, too, they adopted a similar line, and without much ado the fight, commenced in a desultory fashion, soon became a battle. Within the barricades was a dense body of armed and angry citizens, each with his little badge, and every single one of them was ready to fight to the death. There is no false patriotism now, no mere bravado. Men make declarations and carry them out. The gallant Londoners, with their several Maxims, wrought havoc among the invaders, especially in the Tottenham Court Road, where hundreds were maimed or killed. In Oxford Street, the enemy being under cover of their counter barricades, little damage could be done on either side. The wide open, deserted thoroughfare was every moment swept by a hail of bullets, but no one was injured. On the Great Portland Street side, the populace made a feint of giving way at the Mortimer Street barricade, and a body of the enemy rushed in, taking the obstruction by storm. But next moment they regretted it, for they were set upon by 1,000 armed men and wild-haired women, so that every man paid for his courage with his life. The women, seizing the weapons and ammunition of the dead Germans, now returned to the barricade to use them. The Mortimer Street defences were at once repaired, and it was resolved to relay the fatal trap at some other point. Indeed, it was repeated at the end of Percy Street, where about 50 more Germans, who thought themselves victorious, were set upon and exterminated. Until dusk the fight lasted. The Germans, finding their attack futile, began to hurl petrol bombs over the barricades, and these caused frightful destruction among our gallant men, several houses in the vicinity being set on fire. Fortunately there was still water in the street hydrants, and 2 fire engines had already been brought within the beleaguered area in case of necessity. At last, about 7 o'clock, the enemy, having lost very heavily in attempting to take the well-chosen position by storm, brought down several light field guns from Regent's Park, and placing them at their counter barricades, where, by the way, they had lost many men in the earlier part of the conflict while piling up their shelters, suddenly opened fire with shell at the huge obstructions before them. At first they made but little impression upon the flagstones, etc., of which the barricades were mainly composed. But before long their bombardment began to tell. For slowly, here and there, exploding shells made great breaches in the defences that had been so heroically manned. More than once a high explosive shell burst right among the crowd of riflemen behind a barricade, sweeping dozens into eternity in a single instant. Against the fortified houses each side of the barricades the German artillery trained their guns, and very quickly reduced many of those buildings to ruins. The air now became thick with dust and smoke, and mingled with the roar of artillery at such close quarters came the screams of the injured and the groans of the dying. The picture drawn by the eye-witness who described this was a truly appalling one. Gradually the Londoners were being overwhelmed, but they were selling their lives dearly, fully proving themselves worthy sons of grand old England. At last the fire from the Newman Street barricade of the defenders was silenced, and 10 minutes later, a rush being made across from Dean Street, it was taken by storm. Then ensued fierce and bloody hand-to-hand fighting right up to Cleveland Street, while almost at the same moment the enemy broke in from Great Portland Street. A scene followed that is impossible to describe. Through all those narrow, crooked streets the fighting became general, and on either side hundreds fell. The defenders in places cornered the Germans, cut them off, and killed them. Though it was felt that now the barricades had been broken the day was lost, yet every man kept courage, and fought with all his strength. For half an hour the Germans met with no success. On the contrary, they found themselves entrapped amid thousands of furious citizens, all wearing their silken badges, and all sworn to fight to the death. While the defenders still struggled on, loud and ringing cheers were suddenly raised from Tottenham Court Road. The people from Clerkenwell, joined by those in Bloomsbury, had arrived to assist them. They had risen and were attacking the Germans in the rear. Fighting was now general right across from Tottenham Court Road to Gray's Inn Road, and by 9 o'clock, though Von Wilberg sent reinforcements, a victory was gained by the defenders. Over 2,000 Germans are lying dead and wounded about the streets and squares of Bloomsbury and Marylebone. The League had struck its first blow for freedom. What will the morrow bring us? Dire punishment or desperate victory? Daily Chronicle Office, October 4, 6 p.m. The final struggle for the possession of London is about to commence. Through all last night there were desultory conflicts between the soldiers and the people, in which many lives have, alas, been sacrificed. Von Wilberg still holds the city proper, with the Mansion House as his headquarters. Within the area already shown upon the map there are no English, all the inhabitants having been long ago expelled. The great wealth of London is in German hands, it is true, but it is Dead Sea fruit. They are unable either to make use of it or to deport it to Germany. Much has been taken away to the base at Southminster and other bases in Essex, but the greater part of the bullion still remains in the Bank of England. The most exciting stories have been reaching us during the last 24 hours, none of which, however, have passed the censor. For that reason I, one of the sub-editors, am keeping this diary as a brief record of events during the present dreadful times. After the terrific struggle at Marylebone 3 days ago, Von Kronhelm saw plainly that if London were to rise en masse, she would at once assume the upper hand. The German Commander-in-Chief had far too many points to guard. On the west of London he was threatened by Lord Byfield and hosts of auxiliaries, mostly sworn members of the National League of Defenders. On the south, across the river, Southwark, Lambeth, and Battersea formed an impregnable fortress, containing over 1 million eager patriots ready to burst forth and sweep away the vain victorious army, while within central London itself the people were ready to rise. League of Defenders, citizens of London and loyal patriots, the hour has come to show your strength, and to wreak your vengeance. Tonight, October 4 at 10 p.m., rise and strike your blow for freedom. 1 million men are with Lord Byfield, already within striking distance of London. 1 million follow them, and yet another 1 million are ready in South London. Rise, fearless and stern. Let England for Englishmen be your battle cry, and avenge the blood of your wives and your children. Avenge this insult to your nation. Remember, 10 o'clock tonight. Reports reaching us to-day from Lord Byfield's headquarters at Windsor are numerous but conflicting. As far as can be gathered, the authentic facts are as follows. Great bodies of the defenders, including many women, all armed, are massing at Reading, Sonning, Wokingham, and Maidenhead. Thousands have arrived and are hourly arriving by train from Portsmouth, Plymouth, Exeter, Bristol, Gloucester, and in fact all the chief centres of the west of England, where Gerald Graham's campaign has been so marvellously successful. Sturdy Welsh colliers are marching shoulder to shoulder with agricultural labourers from Dorset and Devon, and clerks and citizens from the towns of Somerset, Cornwall, Gloucestershire, and Oxfordshire are taking arms beside the riff-raff of their own neighbourhoods. Peer and peasant, professional man and pauper, all are now united with one common object, to drive back the invader and to save our dear old England. Oxford has, it seems, been one of the chief points of concentration, and the undergraduates who reassembled there to defend their colleges now form an advance guard of a huge body of defenders on the march, by way of Henley and Maidenhead, to follow in the rear of Lord Byfield. The latter holds Eton and the country across the High Wycombe, while the Saxon headquarters are still at Staines. Frölich's cavalry division are holding the country across from Pinner through Stanmore and chipping Barnet to the prison camp at Enfield Chase. These are the only German troops outside West London, the Saxons being now barred from entering by the huge barricades which the populace of West London have during the past few days been constructing. Every road leading into London from West Middlesex is now either strongly barricaded or entirely blocked up. Queux, Richmond, and Kingston bridges have been destroyed, and Lord Byfield, with General Bamford at the Crystal Palace, remains practically in possession of the whole of the south of the Thames. The conflict which is now about to begin will be one to the death. While, on the one hand, the Germans are bottled up among us, the fact must not be overlooked that their arms are superior, and that they are trained soldiers. Yet the 2 or 3 local risings of yesterday and the day previous have given us courage, for they show that the enemy cannot manoeuvre in the narrow streets and soon become demoralized. In London we fail because we have so few riflemen. If every man who now carries a gun could shoot, we could compel the Germans to fly a flag of truce within 24 hours. Indeed, if Lord Roberts' scheme of universal training in 1906 had been adopted, the enemy would certainly never have been suffered to approach our capital. Alas, apathy has resulted in this terrible and crushing disaster, and we have only now to bear our part, each one of us, in the blow to avenge this desecration of our homes and the massacre of our loved ones. To-day I have seen the white banners with the red cross, the ensign of the Defenders, everywhere. Till yesterday it was not openly displayed, but to-day it is actually hung from windows or flown defiantly from flagstaffs in full view of the Germans. In Kilburn, or, to be more exact, in the district lying between the Harrow Road and the High Road, Kilburn, there was another conflict this morning between some of the German Guard Corps and the populace. The outbreak commenced by the arrest of some men who were found practicing with rifles in Paddington Recreation Ground. One man who resisted was shot on the spot, whereupon the crowd who assembled attacked the German picket and eventually killed them to a man. This was the signal for a general outbreak in the neighbourhood, and half an hour later, when a force was sent to quell the revolt, fierce fighting became general all through the narrow streets of Kensal Green, especially at the big barricade that blocks the Harrow Road, where it is joined by Admiral Road. Here the bridges over the Grand Junction Canal have already been destroyed, for the barricades and defences have been scientifically constructed under the instruction of military engineers. From an early hour to-day it has been apparent that all these risings were purposely ordered by the League of Defenders to cause Von Kronhelm's confusion. Indeed, while the outbreak at Kensal Green was in progress, we had another reported from Dalston, a third from Limehouse, and a fourth from Homerton. Therefore it is quite certain that the various centres of the League are acting in unison upon secret orders from headquarters. Indeed, South London also took part in the fray this morning, for the defenders at the barricade at London Bridge have now mounted several field guns and have started shelling Von Wilberg's position in the city. It is said that the Mansion House, where the General had usurped the apartments of the deported Lord Mayor, has already been half reduced to ruins. This action is, no doubt, only to harass the enemy, for surely General Bamford has no desire to destroy the city proper any more than it has already been destroyed. Lower Thames Street, King William Street, Gracechurch Street, and Cannon Street have, at any rate, been found untenable by the enemy, upon whom some losses have been inflicted. South London is every moment anxious to know the truth. 2 days after the bombardment, we succeeded at night in sinking a light telegraph cable in the river across from the embankment at the bottom of Temple Avenue, and are in communication with our temporary office in Southwark Street. An hour ago there came, through secret sources, information of another naval victory to our credit, several German warships being sunk and captured. Here we dare not print it, so I have just wired it across to the other side, where they are issuing a special edition. Almost simultaneously with the report of the British victory, namely at 5 o'clock, the truth, the great and all-important truth, became revealed. The mandate has gone forth from the headquarters of the League of Defenders that London is to rise in her might at 10 o'clock to-night, and that 1,000,000 men are ready to assist us. Placards and bills on red paper are everywhere. Frantic efforts are being made by the Germans all over London to suppress both posters and handbills. It is now 6 o'clock. In 4 hours it is believed that London will be one huge, seething conflict. Night has been chosen, I suppose, in order to give the populace the advantage. The by-streets are for the most part still unlit, save for oil lamps, for neither gas nor electric light are yet in proper working order after the terrible dislocation of everything. The scene of the defenders is, as already proved, to lure the Germans into the narrower thoroughfares and then exterminate them. Surely in the history of the world there has never been such a bitter vengeance as that which is now inevitable. London, the greatest city ever known, is about to rise. Midnight. London has risen. How can I describe the awful scenes of panic, bloodshed, patriotism, brutality and vengeance that are at this moment in progress? As I write, through the open window I can hear the roar of voices, the continual crackling of rifles, and the heavy booming of guns. I walked along Fleet Street at 9 o'clock, and I found, utterly disregarding the order that no unauthorized persons are to be abroad after nightfall, hundreds upon hundreds of all classes, all wearing their little silk Union Jack badges pinned to their coats, on the way to join in their particular districts. Some carried rifles, other revolvers, while others were unarmed. Yet not a German did I see in the streets. It seems as though for the moment the enemy had vanished. There was only the strong cordon across the bottom of Ludgate Hill, men who looked on in wonder, but without bestirring themselves. Is it possible that Von Kronhelm's strategy is to remain inactive and refuse to fight? The first shot I heard fired, just after 10 o'clock, was at the Strand end of Fleet Street, at the corner of Chancery Lane. There, I afterwards discovered, a party of 40 German infantrymen had been attacked, and all of them killed. Quickly following this, I heard the distant booming of artillery, and then the rattle of musketry and pom-poms became general, but not in the neighbourhood where I was. For nearly half an hour I remained at the corner of Aldwych, then on going farther along the Strand I found that the defenders from the Waterloo Road had made a wild sortie into the Strand, but could find no Germans there. The men who had for a fortnight held that barricade at the bridge were more like demons than human beings. Therefore I retired, and in the crush made my way back to the office to await reports. They were not long in arriving. I can only give a very brief résumé at the moment, for they are so numerous as to be bewildering. Speaking generally, the whole of London has obeyed the mandate of the League, and rising or attacking the Germans at every point. In the majority of cases, however, the enemy hold strong positions and are defending themselves, inflicting terrible losses upon the unorganized populace. Every Londoner is fighting for himself, without regard for orders or consequences. In Bethnal Green the Germans, lured into the maze of by-streets, have suffered great losses, and again in Clerkenwell, St. Luke's, Kingsland, Hackney, and Old Ford. Whitechapel, too, devoid of its alien population, who have escaped into Essex, has held its own, and the enemy have had some great losses in the streets off Cable and Leman Streets. With the exception of the sortie across Waterloo Bridge, South London is, as yet, remaining in patience, acting under the orders of General Bamford. News has come in 10 minutes ago of a fierce and sudden attack upon the Saxons by Lord Byfield from Windsor, but there are as yet no details. From the office across the river I am being constantly asked for details of the fight and how it is progressing. In Southwark the excitement is evidently most intense, and it requires all the energy of the local commanders of the defenders to repress another sortie across that bridge. There has just occurred an explosion so terrific that the whole of this building has been shaken as though by an earthquake. London has struck her first blow of revenge. What will be its sequel? End of chapter 1. Recording by Tom Weiss. tomsaudiobooks.com.